Administrator Fernandez, it's so good to see you again. It was almost exactly a year ago, I think, that you came to Minnesota for the field hearing for the Housing Transit Subcommittee. Mr. Chair, we had a really terrific field hearing talking about transit issues in Minnesota, and I greatly appreciated you taking the time to come and talk with our local leaders and community leaders about our transit needs. So thank you so much for that again. I want to actually follow up on something that my good friend and colleague from Nevada was just talking about. The bipartisan infrastructure law has already put millions of dollars into transit systems around the country for building new lines, replacing buses, and improving transit infrastructure. And these dollars are supporting transit agencies that are pursuing clean energy through low or no emissions vehicles. This is an issue close to my heart because companies like New Flyer in Minnesota are working very hard to meet this increasing demand for zero emissions buses. But like all bus manufacturers, there's a shortage of microchips, which is making it hard to fill orders in a timely way. This is something that I've been hearing about from Minnesota transit agencies in advance of the subcommittee hearing we had on this issue earlier this year. So we have heard a lot of talk here in Washington about the impacts of the chip shortage on the car market, but I think it's important to pay attention to its impact on transit also. So can you talk to me a little bit about this, Administrator Fernandez? Is the FTA focusing on this? What is the impact of the chip shortage on our capacity to implement the bipartisan infrastructure law? And then just as a follow-up, seems to me, Mr. Chair, that if we could enact USICA, the competitiveness bill, this would be another benefit of that for transit in the United States as well. But could you just talk to this chip shortage and its impact on transit?
Yes, and Senator, I'm so glad you referenced the field hearing because it was really my distinct pleasure to join you there and talk about the great things that are happening in your state as well. As we have all noted, the supply chain for manufacturing, particularly around the metals and minerals needed for this transition to zero emission has been one that has been highlighted. And we are, DOT continues to be one of the lead agencies on the White House Supply Chain Disruption Task Force. I am very encouraged by the progress that has been made, and as I stated earlier, the focus on how we get our systems operational, get the tools, get the materials and the equipment that is necessary, the components that is necessary, is something that is of high attention, has garnered high attention at the DOT. Mm-hmm. The American manufacturers are all stepping up. As I noted, there's about $80 billion in planned investments in semiconductor manufacturing and more than $100 billion in announced investments in the electric vehicles. So those will help keep pace once those investments continue to be made, and will keep pace with the applications that transit agencies are submitting. We just we issued the notice of funding opportunity for our bus facilities. It was a combined NOFO that also included the low and no emission vehicle procurement, and that closed in May, the end of May, and we will be announcing the selections of those. That means that we will have hundreds of new buses that are going to be manufactured, and the industry is stepping up to meet that challenge.
That's fantastic. We want these buses manufactured in the United States, and the more that we can have the components for these buses, including microchips, also manufactured in the United States, I think we're going to be much better off, and I think it goes to the importance of passing USICA. Just a couple seconds that I have left, I want to ask you about something related to equity. Now, transit, we know, is a vital tool for advancing equity in disadvantaged communities. It is the way in which people get to their jobs, to their educations, they get their groceries, they get their health care. But we also know that transit can be harmful to communities that are displaced as a construction happens, that there is displacement of economic and cultural corridors, and it can be very hard on small businesses. I'm really proud of the work that the Met Council in Minnesota and Hennepin County have done on the Bottineau extension in Minnesota, which is they've created an anti-displacement work group that is organized to mitigate the issues of displacement as transit is being constructed. I think that bringing this kind of equity lens to transit is really important. I want to just appreciate, and I appreciated our conversations about this when you were in Minnesota. Could you just address this briefly, Administrator Fernandez? What is the FTA doing to think about expanding access to contracts, for example, and addressing the direct needs that we have around small and minority-owned businesses impacted by transit and creating opportunities for them?
Yes, and thank you for that question, because as you may know, equity is one of the highest priority considerations. We want to make sure that transit in itself is an equalizer and provides that opportunity and access to all. As we think about development that happens in communities, and it's particularly development that involves federal investment in land that is now going to be part of a transit-oriented development or a joint development project. The emphasis on the Relocation Act, working closely with the community, the outreach that transit agencies have to document for these changes, and also what type of mitigations are going to be included in the project. Those are all part of the NEPA process, but in addition to that, it's part of about building that partnership with the community where this new investment is going to take place. As it relates to the small and disadvantaged businesses, we have our small and disadvantaged business programs following the regulations that are in place. We'll be updating those because we want to see more small and disadvantaged businesses be part of the great investment that the bipartisan infrastructure law is bringing to transit agencies across the nation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Smith. Senator Sinema from Arizona is recognized from her office.